Welcome to Starbound. I'm Jack, your narrator for today. Nearly 500 supporters get early access to our stories, including fresh episodes of Sunspire Academy and Fran and Remy. If you'd like to unlock those early releases and help support future adventures, tap join below to become a Starbound member. Now, let's jump into today's story. The teleportation pad wheezed, sparked, and finally coughed up a cloud of ionized particles that smelled suspiciously like burnt toast. When the haze thinned, Mika Hargreaves stood at its center, listing to one side, her stomach doing backflips while the world wobbled like bad gelatin. She reached for her duffel bag to steady herself, only to realize it was hovering a full 8 inches off the ground. "Oh," she muttered, trying not to vomit. "That's new. First interstellar transport?" asked a voice like someone gargling wind chimes. Mika blinked away the stars in her eyes and found herself face to face, or face to triple eye, with a tall, narrow alien whose skin was so translucent she could see blue fluid pulsing slowly through its veins. It wore what looked like a standard issue administrator's uniform, if standard issue also included a personal shield generator, which this one very much did. The blue energy barrier hummed steadily between them. Yes, Mika replied, then realized she was still grasping at empty air where her bag had floated. She snatched the duffel out of the air, clutching it tightly and trying to look less dizzy than she felt. First time off Earth, actually. At the word Earth, the administrator visibly flinched and tapped something on a sleek wrist device, causing the energy field to glow brighter. "I am Administrator Plex," it said, taking a very deliberate step backward. "Welcome to Galactic Preparatory Academy. Your presence here is quite historic." Thanks." Mika tucked a stray curl of auburn hair behind her ear, feeling awkward about both the warm flush in her cheeks and the administrator's sudden anxiety. "I'm Mika. Mika Hargreaves." "Yes, the human," Administrator Plex replied, with the same uneasy tone someone might use to describe a live grenade. "Follow me, please," from a distance of no less than 6 feet. As they walked through the pristine, curving halls of what was now her school for the next year, Mika tried to take it all in, even though the architecture seemed to twist in ways that made her question the basic laws of physics. Geometry and gravity shifted subtly as they moved, each section of the hallway altering just enough to make Mika's balance wobble. Through transparent walls, she caught glimpses of classrooms filled with beings of every shape, size, and state of matter. Some floating in liquid tanks, others slithering along surfaces, and a few existing partly in dimensions her eyes couldn't fully comprehend. "This is so cool," Mika whispered, momentarily forgetting her queasiness. Administrator Plex looked back at her, all 3 eyes blinking in eerie synchronization. "Yes, well, we pride ourselves on accommodating all galactic citizens, even those from challenging environments." The way Plex said challenging made Mika's brow furrow. Sure, Earth had its issues, climate disasters, unstable politics, the occasional rogue AI, but it wasn't a complete disaster zone. "Here we are," Plex said, stopping before a door that shimmered like liquid glass. "Your dormitory assignment. The housing coordinator will assist you further. Remember to disclose any environmental needs that might, prevent unfortunate incidents." Before Mika could ask what kind of incidents Plex meant, the administrator scuttled away, personal shield still glowing. A moment later, the door slid open to reveal Miss Trill, the housing coordinator, about 4 feet tall, with glistening amphibious skin and large, bulbous eyes that blinked independently. "To the Deathworlder," Taz said, raising his glass, his scales glowing a cheerful orange, "who taught us that survival means more than just avoiding danger. It means facing it with courage." "To Mika," the others echoed, lifting their drinks and clinking them together in a chorus of laughter and respect. As the sound of celebration echoed around her, Mika felt something deep and solid settle inside her, a feeling of belonging she hadn't known since leaving Earth. She didn't have to downplay her origins or pretend to be anything other than who she was. By leaning into her differences, she had found connection, trust, even admiration. Mika Hargreaves, human from Earth, Deathworlder, survivor, yes, but more importantly, a teammate, a friend, and finally, just another student at the most extraordinary, unpredictable, and welcoming school in the galaxy. Celebrate the end of term together. Ma raised a cup of something fizzy and purple. Taz offered a tray of glowing fruit slices. and Krill's tank pulsed gently with a celebratory hue. Jiv extended a crystalline tendril in what Mika had come to recognize as a gesture of camaraderie. They found a quiet spot near the edge of the reception hall, where bioluminescent plants cast shifting patterns on the walls, and settled in, laughing and recounting their favorite and most terrifying moments from the cave expedition. Mika listened, smiling as her friends recalled how she had patched Krill's tank, led them through pitch-black tunnels, and stood her ground against flying predators with nothing but a sharpened stalactite. For the first time, she didn't feel like she had to prove herself. They already knew her value, and she knew theirs. The conversations around them hummed with excitement, plans for the next term, debates about Earth's potential, and speculation about what the incoming human students would be like. Mika looked around at the strange, beautiful mix of beings she now called her community, and felt something settle warmly in her chest. This place, this school, was no longer just a challenge, it was home. And communicate through bioluminescence. Taz can see in near total darkness. Ma can process environmental data faster than most computers, and each of those abilities makes sense for the worlds they come from. Earth is no different, it's just a little wilder, a little messier, and a lot more unpredictable. I've learned that strength doesn't always look the same. Sometimes it's quiet, like solving a problem with the tools at hand. Sometimes it's loud, like yelling at a cave monster with a spear made from a stalactite. But always, it's about doing what you have to, not just for yourself, but for the people beside you. She paused, glancing around at the now silent amphitheater, the moment stretching between them. If sharing my story helps you understand Earth better, or helps someone else like me feel a little less alone, then I'm proud to stand here today. Thank you for giving me the chance to prove who we really are. The amphitheater erupted into applause, not hesitant or polite, but full-throated and sincere. Mika stepped back from the podium, cheeks flushed, her chest tight with emotion. For the first time since she'd boarded the transport off Earth, she felt not like a guest, but like she belonged. Of pride rise in her chest as the applause swelled around her. Standing beside Administrator Plex under the amphitheater's crystalline dome, she accepted the commendation. A sleek metallic badge etched with the Academy's insignia and a stylized depiction of Lynx 3's cavern mouth. As she turned to face the crowd, she spotted students of every species clapping, some even giving Earth-style cheers they'd clearly practiced. Ma gave her a thumbs up, Taz blinked his approval in 3 colors, Jiv's facets sparkled with emotion, and Krill emitted a musical trill of support. Plex raised one hand for quiet and continued. This term has taught us that strength does not lie in sameness, but in the synergy of differences. And Earth, with its unpredictable environment and resilient species, has much to offer. Mika stepped back into her seat, the commendation still warm in her hand. Her mind buzzed with possibilities, not just for herself, but for every human who would follow. No longer the outsider from a so-called death world, she had become a symbol of cooperation, adaptability, and unexpected strength. For the first time since leaving home, Mika felt she wasn't just surviving, she was thriving, and changing the galaxy while she was at it. Insisted, though Mika couldn't help noticing that Pelk's shell flushed a pleased shade of pink whenever she told stories about Earth. But the most unexpected shift came from her former roommate, Zerxel. One day in the dining hall, the insectoid alien approached with twitching antennae and rigid posture that suggested extreme discomfort. I wish to offer an apology, Zerxel said, voice formal and precise. My prior behavior was rooted in ignorance and cultural bias. Your conduct on Lynx 3 has proven that Earth adaptations are not dangerous anomalies, but strategic evolutionary assets. Mika smiled warmly. Apology accepted. I get it. Earth does sound terrifying from the outside. Extremely, Zerxel agreed, compound eyes shimmering with color. But I would be grateful if you would teach me more. From then on, Mika found herself surrounded not just by one curious peer, but many. Students who once kept their distance now asked for advice, especially on hands-on assignments and survival simulations. She even developed a small following after demonstrating human skills like fire starting without tech, purifying water with improvised tools, and determining edible plants by observation instead of sensors. Even Administrator Plex, who had once refused to be in the same room without a shield generator, now walked past her with only a faint shimmer of defense field. "Just protocol," he insisted, all three eyes blinking in sync, nothing personal. "A species," Professor Zilk said, "should not be evaluated solely by the severity of its environment, but by the ingenuity of its adaptations in response." And as he spoke, Mika noticed something had shifted in his tone. The distant, clinical detachment was gone, replaced by open curiosity and, she dared to think, actual respect. "I would like," he continued, "if you're willing to incorporate your experiences into future lessons. A first-hand perspective on how Earth's unique conditions shape human development would be extremely valuable." "I'd be happy to," Mika replied, her voice steady with quiet pride. But the changes didn't end there. Mr. Yorn, looking uncharacteristically sheepish, summoned Mika to his office and informed her, while avoiding eye contact and twitching his nose nervously, that she was being moved from the remedial program to the standard curriculum. "After reassessing your test data," he admitted, "it appears Earth's academic systems are unexpectedly rigorous, especially in practical reasoning and adaptive cognition." Mika thanked him politely, choosing not to gloat. "I look forward to proving it," she said. Even her dorm life improved. She was assigned a new roommate, Pelk, a mollusk-like alien who communicated through shifting skin patterns and who greeted her with a polite swirl of green and blue, indicating intense curiosity, purely for scientific purposes, of course. She had supposedly crafted sophisticated tools from cave debris, held her breath for 10 straight minutes underwater, and tamed wild creatures with a glare. Most of these stories were pure embellishment, but Mika didn't bother correcting them. The truth was already enough. She'd stayed calm in a disaster, applied her Earth-honed survival instincts, and led her peers to safety. 3 days later, Professor Zilk asked to see her after class. His containment sphere hovered calmly, tentacles swaying in a contemplative rhythm rather than their usual twitchy flutter. "I've been revising my curriculum," he began, without preamble. "Your performance on Lunex 3 has disrupted several long-standing assumptions regarding Class 5 species." Mika raised an eyebrow. "Sir?" "It seems," Zilk continued, "that the harsh conditions we believed would create only brutish survivors have instead forged unusually adaptable and resourceful beings. Your capacity to remain lucid under duress, to improvise with scant materials, to lead, these are not mere survival traits. They are high-order evolutionary assets." Mika couldn't help the smirk tugging at her lips. "So Earth's not just a death world, it's basically elite training grounds." Zilk's tentacles curled subtly, an amused ripple through his translucent form. "I'm suggesting," he replied, "that our entire classification system may require a thorough reevaluation." Mika did it. The Deathworlders saved us all. Before Ma could respond, a shadow passed overhead. She looked up to see the familiar shape of Professor Zilk's containment sphere hovering down, flanked by stunned security officers and wide-eyed students. "Impossible," Zilk muttered, his tentacles writhing in disbelief. "By all statistical models, you should be dead." Ma staggered to her feet, soaked in phosphorescent cave water, curls wild and tangled, bruises painting her skin, half her uniform jacket missing. But her green eyes blazed with unshakable pride. "Statistical models," she said, voice ragged but steady, "should learn to account for Deathworlders." News of their survival raced through the Galactic Preparatory Academy like a supernova. By the time Mika returned to her dorm, thoroughly examined by medics who were equal parts horrified and fascinated by the human body's stress tolerances, the campus was alive with whispers and reappraisals. No longer were humans spoken of in fearful, disgusted murmurs. Instead, they were a subject of respect, awe even. The tale of the cave ordeal expanded with every retelling. Ma had battled hordes of carnivorous creatures with nothing but a shard of rock. She had carried injured students on her back through collapsing tunnels and pitch-black labyrinths. "We survived," Taz corrected, his scales now a warm gold reflecting the overwhelming relief washing over them all. Mika lay back on the spongy purple vegetation, chest heaving, as she stared up at the hazy sky of Lunex 3, streaked with soft oranges and pale violet clouds. The surreal beauty of the alien landscape hit her for the first time without the pressure of imminent danger. Around her, the others sprawled in various states of exhaustion. Maz curled in a damp ball beside her, still panting, Taz dragging himself upright to scan the area with alert eyes. Krill's tank gently bobbing near the water's edge, glowing faintly but still holding strong. And Jiv, ever composed, sitting serenely with her crystalline limbs folded, refracting sunlight into dazzling rainbows. Mika let her eyes close for a moment, the warmth on her face a quiet reassurance that they were really truly safe. No more falling, no more running, at least not for now. Next time, she muttered, voice hoarse but steady, we take the boring field trip. Laughter, raw, breathless, and real, echoed from the group. They were stranded on an alien moon, miles from the landing site, but for the first time all day, it didn't feel impossible. It felt like hope. Mika's warning came just as the river plunged into open space, the tank hurtling over the edge with all 5 of them clinging desperately to the harness. They dropped in a chaotic blur of light, spray, and panicked shouting, the sound of rushing water roaring in their ears. For a moment, Mika couldn't breathe. Then the tank slammed into the pool below with a bone-jarring splash, sending up a geyser of glowing droplets. They bobbed wildly, tossed by the turbulence, but the tank held. One by one, they surfaced coughing and gasping, still tethered to Krill's tank, which floated upright, its patch holding by sheer luck or force of will. Above them the waterfall thundered out of the cliffside, a glowing cascade tumbling from the darkness. Around them stretched a wide, shallow basin ringed by Lunex 3's orange-lit landscape, twisted trees, lavender grass, and a sky streaked with gold. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Taz let out a giddy laugh, his scales flashing brilliant turquoise. "We're alive," he said. Mika nodded, heart pounding, breath ragged. "We're out." And despite everything, the fear, the cave-in, the creatures, she couldn't help but smile. The group stood on the rocky ledge, eyes fixed on the glowing river below, tension crackling in the air as Mika tightened the last knot on the makeshift harness. "Everyone ready?" she asked, voice steady despite the stakes. Taz swallowed hard, his scales now a determined green. "As I'll ever be." Jiv carefully positioned herself atop Krill's tank, securing her angular limbs to the improvised supports with surprising delicacy. "My mass distribution should remain stable if we avoid abrupt shifts," she noted. Maz clambered into place beside Mika, whiskers twitching nervously but eyes bright with resolve. "This will make a great club story, if we survive." Mika gave him a tight smile. "We will." With coordinated effort, they lowered Krill's tank into the current, the glowing water swirling around them as the tank bobbed and steadied. One by one, they clung to their assigned straps, bracing for the ride. Mika was the last to let go of the rock and grip the harness. "Hang on," she said, and pushed off. The current seized them instantly, yanking the tank forward with startling force. The cavern walls blurred past as they raced downstream, water spraying in cold, luminous arcs. Behind them, the cave groaned with the strain of another distant tremor. Ahead, the orange light of the exit grew steadily brighter. Cooler as they moved, the walls slick with condensation that glimmered faintly in the fungi's residual light. The rhythmic sound Jiv had detected soon became audible to the others, a distant, echoing rush like wind filtered through stone. "It's getting louder," Taz noted, his voice steadier now, scales shifting to a cautious but hopeful blue. "We're close." The passage opened at last into a vast cavern, its ceiling lost in darkness above. A wide underground river surged through the center, illuminated by the faint glow of bioluminescent algae clinging to the banks. Mika stepped forward, her breath catching at the sight. "That current's strong," she said, calculating, "but it might lead to the surface." Krill drifted beside her, his tank sloshing gently. "I can sense a slight pressure gradient," he offered, suggesting an incline downstream. "Then that's our path," Mika said. Maz was already scanning the banks for a safe point of entry. "There's a shelf over there," he pointed. "We might be able to launch from it." Jiv extended a limb toward the water, crystalline tips skimming the surface. Temperature is stable, and mineral content suggests it's safe for most species. "Then let's build a raft," Mika said, already sorting through what remained in her field kit. "We're not waiting for rescue, we're making our own way out." "Combat?" she asked, her crystalline voice tinged with disbelief. "Only if we have to," Mika replied, gripping her improvised weapon tightly. "But I'm not letting those things pick us off one by one." Another screech echoed through the tunnel, louder this time, followed by the flutter of leathery wings. The creatures were closing in. Mika positioned herself between the others and the tunnel's mouth, the pointed end of the stalactite ready. "Form a circle," she instructed, voice calm despite the adrenaline rushing through her veins. "Protect Krill in the center." The others obeyed, hesitantly raising their own weapons. Taz's scales flickered from pale green to steel gray as he steadied his stance. Jiv adjusted the angle of her shard to reflect the faint light, creating disorienting flashes. Maz, though trembling, bared his small teeth in a determined expression. The first of the bat-like predators dove toward them, teeth gleaming. Mika lunged, slashing at its wing. It shrieked and veered away. The others followed suit, striking out when the next creature attacked. The fight was chaotic but brief. The creatures retreated, shrieking in frustration, leaving behind a shaken but unharmed group. Breathing hard, Mika lowered her makeshift spear. "Let's move," she said, "while we still have the chance." Sickness. "This is kind of like that, just underground instead of up a mountain." She offered him a small smile, then stood and scanned the rest of the group. Krill was stable for now, floating a little more comfortably in his refilled tank. Jiv hovered near the pool, her body faintly pulsing with crystalline light, while Maz leaned against the wall, clearly winded but alert. "We're not out of this yet," Mika said, her voice steady. "But we're still moving, and that means we're still fighting. That's what matters." She adjusted her field pack and motioned for the others to follow. "Let's keep going. There has to be another chamber ahead, maybe with better air or a way out." As they continued deeper into the caves, the darkness closed in behind them, but so did a strange sense of unity. They were no longer just a collection of students from distant worlds. They were a team, relying on each other to survive. And for the first time since arriving at GPA, Mika didn't feel like a monster or a curiosity. She felt like a leader. Though Mika had no way of knowing if the air would improve, she pressed on. Just keep moving. They emerged into a smaller chamber, its most striking feature a shallow pool of glowing clear liquid that shimmered faintly in the low light. "Water?" Krill asked, his natural luminescence flickering weakly. Jiv glided forward and extended a delicate crystalline limb to the surface. "It appears to be a non-toxic silicone-based liquid, chemically different, but similar enough to water for Krill's needs." "Good enough for me," Mika said, guiding Krill's tank carefully to the pool's edge. The patch she'd applied was swelling ominously, the crack beneath it under growing pressure. "We need to refill the tank without losing what's already inside." The next few minutes were nerve-wracking, as she and Maz worked to partially unseal the tank, siphon in the phosphorescent liquid, and maintain just enough internal pressure to keep Krill submerged. Every move had to be precise. Maz's hands were cold and trembling from exertion, but she worked with unshakable focus. When it was done, the tank was filled and Krill was stable, though the fissure still glistened with threat. "Thank you," Krill said, his translator humming softly, voice full of quiet awe. Mika shook her head, firm and focused. Sometimes the easiest way out is to follow the water until it reaches the surface. Another tremor rattled the cave, stronger this time, sending more dust and fragments tumbling from the ceiling. One of the bat-like creatures swooped closer, and in the flickering glow, its mouth revealed a cluster of needle-like teeth. "We need to move," Mika said sharply. The tunnel she'd chosen sloped downward, growing narrower and colder as they pressed on single file. Each breath left a fog in the air, and the glowing fungi thinned, leaving patches of near darkness, broken only by the soft, pulsing blue of isolated clusters. As predicted, Taz proved invaluable in the lead, his low-light vision allowing him to spot obstacles and turns well ahead. Jiv followed, pausing occasionally to press her crystal body to the cave walls, listening for variations in density. Mika stayed in the middle, one hand steadying Krill's weakening tank as its power drained, the other clutching her multi-tool. Maz brought up the rear, constantly checking over his shoulder at the bat creatures that now glided closer with each passing minute. "The air's getting thinner," Taz warned, his scales dimming to a dull blue-gray. Mika could feel it too, a lightheadedness creeping in, a tightening in her chest. The aliens were struggling. Maz was slowing, and Jiv's edges seemed to blur. Still, Mika kept them moving, voice steady. "You'll find better air soon," she said, more a promise than a guess. Replied, already moving toward the downward-sloping tunnel. On Earth, caves often form near underground rivers, and sometimes they lead to surface outlets through valleys or sinkholes. Besides, we need water just as badly as we need air. If we find a water source, we buy time, and we might find a new path out. The others hesitated, still clearly frightened, but Mika's firm tone and quick thinking were hard to argue with. Maz handed her the data pad without question, and Jiv, still humming softly as she scanned for density shifts, moved to follow. Taz brought up the rear, casting wary glances at the fluttering cave creatures as they edged closer to the fading edges of their light. The group advanced slowly, guided by Jiv's vibrations and Maz's incomplete map. Fungi continued to pulse in shifting patterns around them, casting eerie, beautiful shadows across the stone. Every step felt uncertain, the air colder and thinner, but Mika pushed forward with steady determination. Her mind, sharpened by countless hours of hiking through unpredictable terrain on Earth, was focused on every sound and shift of the path. She wasn't just some anomaly from a death world now, she was their best chance at making it out alive. "Nearby, we can refill your tank once we get moving," Mika added, standing and brushing her hands on her pants. Krill's glow dimmed slightly, relief, maybe gratitude, and he floated a little higher in his containment bubble. Jiv was already shifting the angles of his crystalline plates, producing a soft, resonant hum that echoed faintly off the stone walls. "I'm detecting subtle density differentials along the left passage," he said, his voice chiming like wind through glass. "There may be a thinner section of wall that way." "Great," Mika nodded, then turned to Taz. "You good with the lighting?" The reptilian alien blinked, then his eyes adjusted visibly, pupils widening. "I can see well enough," he said, voice steadier now. Mika took the lead, gesturing for Maz to guide them via his incomplete map, while Jiv's refracted light scouted for possible escape routes. Every few meters she glanced back at Krill's tank, watching the patch carefully. Time was ticking, and she knew they had no margin for error. They were still deep underground, still technically trapped, but they were moving, and for the first time since the cave-in, Mika felt like they had a real chance. "Light refraction to help us see into narrow spaces," Mika asked, already shifting into action mode as she scanned the cave walls for anything resembling a secondary passage. Jiv nodded, his crystalline form brightening as he adjusted his internal angles to concentrate light beams in focused directions. "I can try," he said quietly. Mika turned to Krill, whose water tank was now visibly leaking. "We'll need to patch that crack first," she said. "Taz, do you have anything adhesive in your kit? Sealant? Emergency gel?" The reptilian student, still shaking, dug through his supplies with trembling hands and handed over a small tube. "This might work. It's meant for surface wounds, but—" "Good enough," Mika said, taking it and carefully applying it to the fracture. The leak slowed. "Okay," she breathed, heart racing but her mind sharp. "Maz, lead us toward any unexplored branches on the map. Jiv, stay ahead and scan the walls. Taz, keep an eye on Krill's tank, and let me know if it worsens." The four aliens looked at her, still scared, but now with a flicker of hope. Earth might be a nightmare world, but Mika realized it had prepared her for moments just like this. White Krill, a glowing aquatic alien suspended in a floating tank, hovered beside Jiv, a crystalline student whose gem-like body refracted the fungi's soft light into a kaleidoscope of color. "Professor Zilk," Taz called out, his voice high and tight with panic. "Can you hear us?" A faint reply filtered through the rock wall, barely audible. "Are you injured? Is everyone alive?" "We're okay," Maz shouted back. "Just trapped." The professor's muffled voice came again. "Remain calm. We'll contact the ship for excavation. Conserve oxygen." That last instruction made the group collectively freeze, a new kind of fear settling over them. "How long will that take?" Mika called out. There was a pause. "Several hours at minimum. We need heavy equipment." As if in response, another tremor rattled the cave. Everyone staggered, and a spiderweb crack bloomed across the surface of Krill's tank. A single bead of water slid down. "Professor!" Mika yelled, urgency in her voice. "Krill's tank is compromised. We need help now." No answer came, just the faint shuffle of more pebbles tumbling, and then silence. "The comms are down," Maz said quietly, eyes wide with worry. "We're on our own." His voice echoed, lit dimly by the bioluminescent pulse around them. shade of pale white, a gelatinous blob student who immediately began quivering uncontrollably, and a small avian creature that clung to the wall with trembling talons. Dust swirled in the flickering cave lights as silence fell, thick and tense. Mika coughed, waving particles away from her face, heart pounding in her ears. "Everyone okay?" she asked, voice steadier than she felt. "I think so," Maz replied, ears twitching as he surveyed the collapsed tunnel. "We're sealed in," Mika said grimly, peering at the massive slabs of rock now separating them from the rest of the group. On the other side, she could faintly hear shouting and the buzz of comms devices. Professor Zilk's muffled voice called for rescue protocols. "What do we do?" the avian student asked in a whispery voice. Mika took a breath. "We don't panic. First, check for injuries, then we find another way out." The others turned to her, eyes wide. For the first time, she realized they were all looking to her. Not because she was from a death world, not out of fear, but for leadership. Systems in the Eastern Ridge. Remember to activate your breathing filters once we're inside. The cave mouth gaped like a wound in the cliff of layered purple rock, cool air seeping out with the scent of minerals and a faint sugary tang of bioluminescent spores. Professor Zilk's containment sphere led the way, its lights flickering on to guide them through the darkness. Inside, the narrow passage opened into a vast chamber. The ceiling vaulted high overhead, hung with glowing stalactites that shimmered soft blue. Along the walls, clusters of fungi bloomed in patterns that pulsed with shifting color, blue to green to violet, like the rhythm of a silent, ancient language. "The lumini fungi," Professor Zilk said, his voice echoing through the cave, "communicate through those pulses, exchanging information on nutrient levels, humidity, even danger." Mika stared, captivated. "They're talking in lights," she murmured. "Exactly," the professor replied with evident satisfaction. "This colony is among the largest neural networks ever recorded in this sector. Some scholars theorize it may be a kind of decentralized intelligence, a collective mind formed entirely of fungus. Systems. Please activate your respirators, as the fungal spores within can cause mild to severe hallucinations in unadapted species." The students obediently pulled on compact breathing masks, their voices muffled now as they chattered with excitement. Mika did the same, her own mask hissing softly as it sealed. The cave entrance yawned before them, fringed by glowing lichen and delicate threads of bioluminescent mycelium. Inside, it was breathtaking. Walls glittered with crystalline fungi pulsing faintly in sync, casting shifting patterns of light across the stone. Professor Zilk floated ahead, arms whirring as he gathered samples and dictated notes. As they moved deeper, Mika noticed the group growing more jittery. Eyes darting, steps faltering. Spores were affecting them despite precautions. One student gasped at a wall and began trying to talk to it. Another started giggling uncontrollably. Mika herself felt only a faint tingling behind her eyes, as if the world had gone a little too sharp. "You okay?" Maz asked, steady beside her. "Yeah," Mika said. "Think my Deathworld immune system's doing the heavy lifting." Maz snorted. "Well, for once being terrifying works in your favor." Mika smiled, surprised at how grateful she felt for even that small joke. Shook her head, trying to suppress a laugh. "No, humans definitely do not eat brainstems to gain knowledge." Maz gave a dramatic sigh of relief, his whiskers flicking in mock terror. As the ship rose higher, Mika caught more snippets from behind. Words like control group, observe stress response, and toxicity threshold. It was hard not to feel like she was more experiment than student. She turned away from the murmurs and watched the planet below shrink, the academy now a cluster of silver glints beneath swirling orange clouds. It should have been a moment of awe, her first view of an alien world from orbit, but all she could feel was the tight knot in her chest. Maz nudged her gently. "Don't let them get to you. You're not here to prove anything to anyone. You belong here, same as the rest of us." "Thanks," Mika murmured, not quite believing it yet, but grateful anyway. "So, the crawl really do that?" she asked, trying to lighten the mood. Maz nodded solemnly. "And they're absolute nightmares in debate class. Win every time." Mika finally laughed, the tension easing just a little as stars bloomed around them. Grin, Mika couldn't tell if that was meant as a warning or an invitation, but she found herself smiling anyway. Whether Maz was joking or not, the fact that he wanted her there was enough. For the first time since arriving, she felt included. More than a Deathworlder, more than a galactic oddity. "Count me in," she said, voice steady. The research vessel was small and packed for function over comfort, its surfaces lined with gear and emergency equipment. Professor Zilk's containment sphere hovered at the front, surrounded by active holodisplays of Lunax 3's varied terrain. "A curious moon," he began, as the 12 chosen students buckled in, home to biome diversity typically found only on larger planets. "Today, we'll study its spore forests and cave networks." Mika clocked the 2 security officers by the exit, one clearly eyeing her, fingers brushing the handle of a stun baton. She kept her gaze fixed on the front, tuning instead into the excited chatter around her. Next to her, Maz bounced slightly in his seat. "This is going to be awesome," he whispered. "The cave fungi? They glow in response to sound. Also, kind of mildly hallucinogenic if you breathe too much of them." Mika laughed. "Of course they are." For the first time since landing at GPA, Mika felt something loosen in her chest. A real conversation with someone who wasn't horrified by her. "Tornadoes? Yeah, they're real. We get them mostly in the Midwest. I've never seen one up close, though." Maz leaned in, tail coiled around the chair leg, eyes wide with curiosity. "And you have microorganisms living inside you? Billions?" "Our microbiome," Mika nodded. "They help us digest and fight infections." Maz looked amazed. Most species would treat that as a major medical crisis. They talked through the entire lunch period, Maz asking about thunderstorms, sunburns, even seasonal allergies. Things Mika had never thought twice about suddenly sounded wild and exotic through his fascination. "You know," Maz said, wiping his paws, "the Xenobiology Club's going on a field trip to Lunax 3 next week. It's a small moon with weird little biomes, not Earth-level extreme, but still fun. You should come." Mika blinked, hope flickering. "You think they'd let me?" Maz grinned. "Professor Zilk is the club advisor, and he hasn't stopped talking about you. Plus, who wouldn't want a Deathworlder along on a dangerous science trip?" Mika blinked, surprised but oddly relieved by the enthusiasm. "Yeah," she said, gesturing to the seat across from her. "They're called tornadoes. Not super common, but real." Maz climbed up eagerly, tail flicking as he pulled out a datapad. "And sinkholes that swallow entire towns?" Mika nodded. "Yup, also volcanoes, earthquakes, and the occasional fire tornado." Maz let out a soft chittering noise that might have been excitement or horror, maybe both. "Incredible. Your planet violates so many standard safety protocols. I can't wait to write my paper on this." Mika snorted. "Just don't list me as a hazard." Maz's eyes sparkled. "Too late. You're already my primary source." Around them, a few other students slowed their pace, sneaking glances. Not all fearful. One even waved. Mika gave a tentative nod back. She hadn't made many friends yet, but maybe she'd just made her first real one. Maybe Earth's chaos didn't have to be something she was ashamed of. Maybe, in this strange galaxy, surviving Earth made her something kind of extraordinary. A voice piped up from behind her, halting Mika mid-step. She turned to see a student with glimmering scales and wide, curious eyes. Not fearful, just fascinated. "Is it true you can regrow your limbs?" they repeated, clutching a datapad. Mika blinked. "No," she said flatly. "We're not lizards, we just get a lot of stitches." The scaly student looked genuinely disappointed. "Oh, still, you survive so much. It's kind of amazing." Mika hesitated, caught off guard. "Thanks, I guess." Another student stepped closer, this one translucent and hovering a few inches off the floor. "Is it true your species climbed Everest with no environmental shielding?" Mika nodded cautiously. "Some people, yeah. Not me." The translucent one pulsed a soft lavender, a color Mika was beginning to associate with awe. "That's incredible." Slowly, others emerged from the edges of the hallway. Not everyone, and not too close, but watching her now with interest instead of dread. A small one with dozens of blinking eyes raised a limb. "Do you really wrestle apex predators for sport?" Mika sighed, then smirked. "Only in Florida." The cluster of aliens broke into a confused chorus of sounds, gasps, chirps, the burble of flowing water, but she saw no fear now, only amazement. Maybe she wasn't making friends yet, but at least the fear was turning into something else. Something closer to curiosity, maybe even respect, before stabilizing again. "Well then," he said, adjusting the projection with a flick of his appendage, "I believe that concludes any lingering doubts about human environmental tolerance." He glanced around the room, where several students were now actively shifting away from Mika's desk, giving her a wide berth as though she might spontaneously combust. "Let us remember," he added, his tone cautionary, "that this resilience is not simply physical, it is cultural. Humans not only survive inhospitable environments, they often seek them out for entertainment." The display changed again to show a montage of humans skiing down icy cliffs, running ultramarathons through deserts, diving into Arctic waters. They compete, they innovate, and perhaps most alarmingly, they adapt with unnerving speed. Mika crossed her arms, unsure whether to feel proud or alienated. While other species specialize to suit specific conditions, Zilk concluded, humans generalize, improvise, and prevail. Their planet may be classified as a Class 5 death world, but to them, it's simply home. He gave a slow, deliberate nod. And that, class, is why any civilization engaging with Earth must do so with both caution and respect. The bell chimed, signaling the end of class, and still no one made eye contact with Mika as they filed out. "Excellent suggestion," Professor Zilk nodded. "The trenches are indeed among the most extreme, yet humans have sent machines and even people into them." The hologram shifted again, displaying a high-altitude photo of Mount Everest. Others might argue for the high mountains, where oxygen is scarce and temperatures are lethal, yet humans not only survive there, they climb for recreation. More images flashed. Burning deserts, flooded jungles, erupting volcanoes. Or the deserts, the rainforests, the tectonic fault zones. Humans don't just endure these places, they make documentaries about them. Laughter rippled weakly through the room, though Mika could feel the tension behind it. All of these regions, Zilk went on, have contributed to a species with remarkable resilience, and perhaps more importantly, a cultural tendency to see adversity as a challenge to be overcome, not a deterrent. He turned to face the class fully now, the image of a human still hovering above them. This mindset has consequences. It breeds explorers, inventors, warriors. And that, he said, voice lowering a notch, is why humans must be understood, because ignoring them, underestimating them, has historically proven to be unwise. The classroom fell into a hushed silence as Zilk clicked off the display. Venom, crushing force, speed, and stealth, each one a natural weapon refined by millennia of survival on a planet that offers no mercy. And these, Professor Zilk said, gesturing to the terrifying images now hovering in midair, are not even the most dangerous species. The display blinked, revealing a human silhouette. "This is." A ripple of murmurs moved through the classroom. "Humans," Zilk continued, "possess no claws, no fangs, no armor or natural toxins, yet they have conquered every biome on their world, from frozen tundra to deep jungle, from mountain peaks to the ocean floor." The hologram shifted again, showing fire, cities, space shuttles, and wars. Through technology, collaboration, and sheer stubborn will, humans have bent their environment to suit them, and survived conditions that would destroy nearly any other known life form. Mika sat very still, jaw tight, as her classmates gave her side glances ranging from curiosity to outright alarm. "It is said," Zilk concluded, "that to befriend a human is to gain an ally who will fight beside you to the bitter end, and to make one your enemy." He let the sentence trail off, letting the silence speak. The hologram flickered off. Mika didn't say a word, but inside she was burning. Not from shame, but from the quiet, rising fire of purpose. Diverse life forms with an overview of environmental classifications and their impact on species evolution. The voice continued smoothly. "Please open your data slates to Module 1. Mika did, even as she felt the eyes, or sensory nodules or psionic pulses, of her classmates on her. Her heart thudded against her ribs, equal parts rage and determination. The screen lit up with diagrams of planetary classifications, from Class 1 Paradise Worlds to Class 5 Death Worlds. Zilk's voice deepened slightly. "Few species from Class 5 planets ever make it to interstellar society. Those who do often demonstrate unusual levels of resilience, adaptability, and behavioral unpredictability." At this, more students turned toward Mika, subtle but unmistakable. She didn't flinch. "Let them stare." Professor Zilk continued. "Humans are a recent addition to our records, their classifications still debated. Some argue Earth should be Class 6, but the consensus remains at Class 5 for now." Mika's eyes narrowed. She wasn't just being underestimated. She was being studied, dissected, categorized like a fascinating bug. Well, they wanted a case study? Fine, she'd give them one. Not just a human, but the human. The one who aced every exam, outperformed every expectation, and proved to the entire galaxy that surviving Earth didn't make her less, it made her exceptional. Which is admirable, Mr. Yorn said quickly, though he was still fidgeting with the edges of her transcript, like it might bite him. But our curriculum here includes neural lattice theory and 8D logic matrices, subjects that typically require a different set of cognitive adaptations. Mika's hands clenched on her lap. So because I grew up dodging hurricanes and bacteria, you think I can't handle higher education? Mr. Yorn winced, his ears twitching. No, I believe you can. Eventually. Many students from Deathworlds adjust quite well over time. We even have an accelerated acclimatization track, specifically for those who, require additional academic support. Mika stared at him, incredulous. A remedial course? She said, voice flat. For being human? Mr. Yorn offered her what was probably meant to be a reassuring smile, though it came off more like someone about to defuse a bomb. Not remedial. Adaptive. It's designed to help Deathworlders like you transition into our rigorous academic environment without undue stress or embarrassment. Mika didn't reply. She was too busy mentally calculating how many ways she could prove him wrong before the semester ended. Not be entirely for show. I'm not carrying any diseases, Mika said, trying to hold on to some sense of normalcy. It's not that, specifically, Miss Trill said, squirming a bit. It's more about what you represent. Earth is, well, there's really no polite way to phrase it. Earth is classified as a Class 5 death world. I'm sorry, what now? Mika blinked. A planet so dangerously unstable, Miss Trill explained, that most species wouldn't last more than a few hours. Extreme temperatures, volatile weather, toxic atmosphere, aggressive microbial life, seismic activity, you name it, Earth has it. But it's just home, Mika said softly, like saying it out loud might make it less absurd. Exactly, Miss Trill agreed with a small smile. Which makes you quite extraordinary, if a bit terrifying to your peers. But don't worry, we'll assign you private quarters for everyone's safety. As Miss Trill guided her to her new room, Mika felt a fresh wave of queasiness, this time from loneliness, not the after effects of teleportation. The next morning she found herself seated across from Mr. Yorn, her assigned guidance counselor, a creature who looked like a cross between a fruit bat and a plush toy. He had 4 blinking eyes, a soft fuzz covering most of his body, and a nose that twitched as if reacting to stimuli only he could perceive. Unlike Administrator Plex, he didn't use a personal shield, though his firm grip on the edge of his desk suggested he was considering it. Mika's jaw dropped. "A what?" she asked, stunned. "Oh dear," Miss Trill croaked, clearly flustered. "Zixel, we discussed." No, Zixel interrupted, now halfway up the wall and retreating into her suspended nest. "My parents specifically included in my enrollment agreement that I wasn't to be exposed to Class 5 environmental hazards, and humans are walking Class 5 hazards. They leak bacteria, they have exposed skin, they consume toxins for fun." Mika looked down at her hands, which seemed completely ordinary, just lightly freckled from all her time outdoors. "I'm not hazardous," she protested weakly, but Zixel was already packing her belongings into a sleek, glossy case. "I'll be submitting a formal transfer request," she declared, zipping past Mika with impressive speed that sent a breeze through the room. "No offense to your species," she added hastily from the doorway, "but I'm rather attached to being alive." And with that, Zixel was gone. Miss Trill sighed, the sound reminiscent of a clogged drain. "I apologize, Mika. We should have anticipated that reaction, though I expected better from her. Zixel's species evolved in a perfectly regulated environmental orb. They're sensitive." "Sensitive to what?" Mika asked, genuinely confused. "I took all the required vaccines before I got here. Mika watched as movement rippled through the strange, hanging structure. 6 delicate jointed limbs extended, and a creature about her size descended gracefully on a thread of shimmering silk. Zix's exoskeleton refracted light in oil-slick rainbows, and her head was dominated by multifaceted eyes that shifted like liquid crystal, not unlike a dragonfly's. "Hi," Mika said with what she hoped was a warm, non-threatening smile. "I'm Mika. Guess we're roommates." Zixel froze mid-descent, every limb locking in place as if she'd just seen a predator. Her eyes dilated, and from deep in her thorax came a high-pitched whine. You're from Earth, she buzzed, voice shaking. Yeah, Mika replied, trying to stay casual. Portland, Oregon, United States of America, technically. At that, Zixel scuttled backward so quickly she hit the wall behind her with a faint clack. "Miss Trill," she called, her voice rising into full-blown panic. "Miss Trill, there's been a mistake." The housing coordinator reappeared, water droplets pattering to the floor as she leaned into the room. "Yes? Problem? You didn't say she was from Earth." Zixel's antennae were vibrating wildly now. "I can't room with a Deathworlder. Just make out a figure coiled in soft iridescent loops, shimmering faintly with shifting colors." From either side of Miss Trill's head, her protruding eyes blinked in opposite rhythms as she stepped aside, water still dripping from her ever-damp suit. "So you're the Earth student?" she asked, her voice wet and bubbly as she scrolled through a holographic display flickering above her webbed fingers. "Such an honor. Very brave program, yes indeed." "Thank you," Mika replied, trying to smile while growing increasingly puzzled at how everyone treated her homeworld like a dangerous experiment. "I'm excited to be here." Of course, Miss Trill burbled, nodding so enthusiastically that water droplets sprayed across the hallway. "You'll be bunking with Zixel, very adaptable, top of her class in xenotolerance." They continued down a corridor where each door appeared built for a different species. One glowed with solidified light, another pulsed with what looked like living moss, and one ominously contained a swirling, controlled black hole. "Here we are." Miss Trill stopped in front of a relatively plain metallic door. "Zixel's already inside. Do try to make a good impression. First Earth student and all that." The door whooshed open, and Mika stepped into a surprisingly normal-looking dorm room, at least on her side. It had a bed, a desk, and a standard storage unit. The other side, however, featured a bizarre hybrid of hammock and hive suspended from the ceiling, softly glowing. Inside, she could just see a sinuous form curled up, its surface glimmering like oil in sunlight.